Now this person found my phone number, they're phoning me, they're WhatsApping me. Did you get my CV? I really want this job. I'm perfect for it. It becomes a nightmarish situation, to put it very lightly. Every single person that I know that is a recruitment consultant complains about this thing. Equally, candidates are complaining about the easy apply on LinkedIn because of the volume of candidates that can apply and do. So it's in the thousands, and they become despondent because will anyone ever see their CV?
Today's guest is a leading recruitment consultant in the UAE and wider MENA region. She brings together businesses from all over and connects them with top-tier accounting and finance talent. She's known for her perseverance, responsiveness, and genuine relationships with candidates as well as clients. Alison, welcome.
Thank you, Akash. It's lovely to be here.
Moving from South Africa to the UAE must have come with a few changes. What has that been like in terms of the recruitment field?
So it has been a really, really big change, both on the personal side and then on the recruitment side. However, when you're dealing in recruitment, you're already dealing with the same product. It's always just people, as we would say. The field looks very different in the UAE. I would say we're talking about a different pace. We're talking about a different market in terms of the nationalities that you're dealing with. Africa obviously also has the diversity, but the UAE market and the GCC market also has a very diverse market in a different sense. It's understanding what clients' needs are based off of what's actually happening every day in the economy, politically, socially, economically. We're looking at different angles and having to identify what our market wants, what is our market doing, what does our talent pool want. So that adjustment takes a while when you first get into the market as a recruiter.
I get that. In terms of pace, is one market different than the other? Is one faster? How does that work?
Certainly. The UAE market, I would say, compared to Africa as a whole, is much faster paced. You might find recruiters that come out from, for example, maybe the UK or even Australia, and they would say it's a lot slower. In Africa, recruitment processes take a long time. So being patient in a market is really important, especially when you're dealing with many stakeholders in the business that go from the talent acquisition all the way up to the CEO. That doesn't really change in principle in the UAE. However, what I would say in terms of pace and what does change is reaction time of the clientele especially, and even the candidates. What you have to understand is that candidates in this market are in many recruitment processes, and so you have to be really fast on the money with them. And you have to get your recruitment process to go quicker than the other 3 or 5, 10 that they might be in.
I get that. So they could be with multiple recruitment firms at the same time, applying for different jobs. And like you said, whichever firm probably reaches the quickest, that would be the quickest for the candidate.
Precisely. And not only that, they are also dealing with potential current opportunities. So they might be in a business where their business doesn't want to lose them because they're a really good employee. So now we deal with a counteroffer situation as well, where the business might know that the employee is not happy and that they've put their hat in 10 other rings. How do we now retain that talent? And so that's the competition out here compared to Africa. Never seen it.
I imagine in that specific example, it's probably very frustrating in the sense where there's a lot of work done. You reach out to the candidates, you connect them with the client and everything. And if that situation happens after a month or after a few weeks of where the candidate withdraws back for a counteroffer, it must be very frustrating because you've put in all this work. Even the candidate has spent time. The clients put that expectation. So how does one deal with that?
In recruitment, we talk about the ABCs. Always be closing.
Always be closing.
What that means is when you have a candidate in a process, you need to basically always follow up with your candidate and find out how they are feeling about a recruitment process. So if they're in interviews and the interviews have gone really well, that's something that you kind of need to really pinpoint. Why is it going well? Are you still motivated? What are your motivating factors? And that really comes with a lot of gut feel, a lot of instinct. You have to kind of understand when somebody is maybe playing the game as opposed to not to being honest. And then you also have to define what those motivating factors are. Everybody moves for a reason.
Right.
Usually they're the same reasons. It's money, it's company culture, it's family, whatever the case might be. They're all moving for very similar reasons, but you need to understand how important that reason is to that candidate.
In terms of that gut feeling, I think that would come with a lot of experience of doing recruitment over many, many years. If you looked at both markets, Africa and UAE, are companies looking for the same thing with candidates, or it's wildly different?
I think most clients think that they're all looking for the same thing, the best candidate. What that looks like is very different. Essentially, in the UAE market, what I have noticed is that clients or companies maybe is a better way, because I'm talking from a recruitment perspective, but most people don't talk on a recruitment perspective, so I should maybe call them companies. Companies usually look for candidates that are going to fit several factors. One is the culture. So what kind of culture are we implementing in this company, and is that candidate is their personality going to fit? But then usually in finance and accounting recruitment specifically, they are looking for the technical competency and potentially also a professional qualification or a highly qualified individual as well. What that looks like and what those requirements are for each company is different. So there are some companies that require somebody to be a Big Four experienced candidate, whilst another company doesn't really mind as long as they have their chartered accountancy qualification. It's my job to discern how important each one of those things are and what the non-negotiables are in a candidate, so that I can match. It's a matchmaking job, this.
Essentially, it's a matchmaking between the client and the actual candidate. I remember, Alison, you shared a very interesting story about a candidate from the Ivory Coast that you placed for a role, and the way they expressed their gratitude to you was just astounding. Could you walk us through that?
Sure. This is one of the things that I really loved about recruiting, specifically in Africa. When you take people out of specific situations where they're doing well, but they could maybe be doing better, it sometimes is life-changing. And this specific candidate, whilst I moved him from Ivory Coast to one of the Central African countries, he basically, we got him an 80% increase in his salary, which from the perspective of, just somebody who wants to look after their family, that's life-changing money. And he was so happy with the service that I was giving him, but also having come to him and seen value in what his experience was. His wife was also so grateful because the package that we managed to negotiate for him included things like health insurance and schooling, for his kids, and even potential pension benefits outside of Africa. So, a dollar-based pension scheme, which is really like that's changing the lives of not only himself, but now his future generations, which is fantastic. And so the gratefulness was really there. And he sent me a traditional Ivorian dress. Well, his wife, she actually went and picked it out. And she sent it along with, some beads that you also wear traditionally with the dress. It's probably the nicest show of gratefulness, but also just the best thank you I ever received. And it really made he still messages me to this day. And he says, "Hi, Alison, I'm just checking in on you. How are you?"
Wow, that was so emotional. If we talk about the hiring process of different companies, I mean, it ranges from multinational companies, government entities, even a startup company. There's a lot of steps involved. There's sometimes an online call, then there's a screening, there are a lot of assessments, especially with finance roles, probably a technical based round, there's competency, questions. Where do you see the best way for companies to attract talent?
Attracting talent in the UAE region is an easy and very difficult job. It can be basically a full-time job for any hiring manager, which is why we are seeing a lot of hiring processes change now to in-house talent acquisition roles, or people actually hiring talent acquisition teams, because it's such a mammoth task. Attracting talent, you can do so in several ways. I think a lot of companies don't realize that word of mouth is a huge thing.
Okay.
What people are saying about your business is really important on the candidate market, because I think we are moving from a place in society where people need the name on their CV to a place where people require the environment to work in. So they are actually, in many ways, looking at company culture over and above what the company name is. But on the other hand, we still have a huge talent pool in the UAE, and so sometimes there are candidates that are like anything goes. That's their attitude. They don't mind, as long as they have a job. That is what makes it difficult, is this sort of very big spectrum of the types of candidates that you can have. So attracting talent is really important to businesses. How to do that in the best way really depends on your reputation on the market and being honest about it.
So you spoke about reputation, company culture. I think nowadays it's been very important for candidates to connect with companies where they feel that name is there. Not only the name, but the reputation and a good culture. How can companies get that right?
That's a fantastic question. I think practice what you preach. Gone are the days where we talk about companies being our families. This is not what people want to hear anymore, because family is toxic. We all have that family member we just
can't stand.
Exactly. We don't want to see at the event. And sometimes company culture can be that way as well, right? Where you're just like, cringe. So practice what you preach is what I would say to companies out there. If you have a work from home policy in place, keep to it. If your policy is that, we come in at 8 and we leave at 5, I feel that a lot of managers probably should be like to the people on their team, listen, what are you doing here? It's 5 o'clock, go home. I know you have a family. I know you have a life. I encourage those things. I would not say that to a person that's underperforming in the team, but I also wouldn't encourage an underperformer, if I would put them that way or class them that way, to be here at 8, 9 o'clock at night, because they still have to be here tomorrow at 8. They're not going to be able to do anything. So again, it's what's the company's policy? What is the company's outlook? And that's a top-down way of looking at it. It has to start from the top. It does have to start from the top.
So when you look at finance, and that's a very refreshing perspective, by the way, to hear that it's so important that companies practice what they preach, whether it's in terms of their timing or work from home policies. The question I have is, usually in finance and accounting roles, with month end, with closing, with the FP&A schedule, there are very hard deadlines that need to be met, usually in the first few days of the next month for the previous month. How do we kind of align that as companies or candidates in terms of timings and workflow to make it more balanced, I would say?
It's a very good question. I think, in terms of that, we're also seeing accounting and finance professionals in this region that are also dealing with regional finance. So they might have to be working in Saudi Arabia where they work on a Sunday. So they do a Sunday to Thursday week, and now your weekend is cut in half basically because you only have Saturday. What companies can do, especially with accounting and finance professionals, is offer them maybe flexible working, or even say, month end falls on a Sunday this month, and let's give you this day off or that day off, So add additional leave days to ensure that your team is rested, to ensure that your team, can perform at those high levels that you require, because finance is one of the departments in a business that really doesn't have set hours or set times or set days of the week. I know Monday to Friday I need to be in the office from 8 until 5, or whatever the case might be. A finance professional has to be there until the last book is closed and the last journal entry is, posted, etc. So being flexible on things like annual leave or working hours. You worked until midnight last night. Please come in at midday tomorrow or 10 tomorrow.
Exactly. I think that has to be, like you said, a top-down approach. And when you have a very supportive manager that encourages you to do that, or that asks you why are you staying beyond a certain time, I think that would be a very key for any person to stay in a company when they know that their manager has their back. One of the pluses or minuses with finance is the books have to be closed every month. It doesn't matter which company or which industry, every single month within the deadline, you have to close the books. So hearing things like annual leaves or flexible policies, that would really help make a candidate's life significantly easier. So when you speak to candidates on a daily basis across different spectrums, what are some of the 3 or 4 things that they tell you, other than salary, that are important for them in a prospective company they join?
So outside of salary, we also have things like benefits. And this is such a all-encompassing word, benefits. What does it mean? Because it's starting to change a little bit in the region now as well. Traditionally, because of the law, housing, transport
allowance,
and, your basic salary is all in one. And then over and above that, companies have to offer you medical insurance. In some regions, that's a benefit. This region, it's not. You have to be given medical insurance. So a lot of people look at the benefits that they're on because it actually does add to their overall monthly salary. They have an education allowance. Some companies are now changing this because they don't feel that candidates that are now coming from outside of the country are actually expats. They have lived here for 10, 15 years, and so they're changing this and they're taking away education allowances. Other companies are introducing them back. Flight allowances is another one that I've had a lot of sticky conversations on in the region, because they get a flight allowance and I don't get a flight allowance with this company, or the other way around. So those are the things that I would say. A lot of candidates are coming to me on flexible working in the UAE or in the region. It's not a very popular concept. So when they have a role that allows them to work from home, even 2 days a week,
hybrid working hours maybe,
it's a big thing.
Now the focus is changing in the sense that candidates prefer these. In terms of sticky situations that you were saying, I was thinking about, let's say a candidate reaches out to a recruitment consultant and they go through the whole process. They do psychometric testing, aptitude tests, they meet with different department heads, they go for the final interview, and then after all this, they get a conditional job offer, which is probably valid for 7 or 10 days. At that point, can a candidate negotiate for a higher salary, or is the budget now set in stone?
I think a candidate can always negotiate for the salary, but you have to be open to the word no. The negotiation table never really closes until you've put the sort of the pen to the paper. But yeah, you can. However, it's probably not the best time to negotiate. If we're talking about when is the optimal time to be negotiating salary, it's not when they've given you the offer. Somebody, if it's not you, if it's your representative, like your recruitment agent or consultant, they should have gone in and said, Alison would like to see this number on her contract. Please ensure that it's as close to that number as possible so that we can make this as smooth as possible, and she'll sign.
Got it. Wouldn't it be from a candidate's point of view, maybe they would say that because they've been through all these tests, they know that the company wants them. Now would be a time, maybe that's not the right approach, but what if a candidate says, I'm not happy with this salary, I'd like this higher? What happens then? Do they risk losing the job to another candidate?
They can. It depends. Everything is about information in a recruitment process. It's how much you know and how many other candidates you know are also in the process, and how badly you know that the company might want to employ you. However, with that being said, it is possible to negotiate, but you do risk then obviously the loss of the offer. So you need to understand what are your motivating factors here. Is the money going to be the biggest change to your life? Because if we're horse trading over a couple, a couple hundred here or there, or you're horse trading about what some might think is a menial benefit. I'm not saying that it is, and I understand why it might be important to candidates. I don't ever want to invalidate why even a couple hundred might be really important to a candidate. I'm just saying you need to understand and weigh out your risks and how badly you want this job and why you wanted the job in the first place, which is why we always talk about the always be closing. We take the candidate back to what their original motivating factor was for leaving, because it wasn't probably the first thing that didn't come out of their mouth was salary.
It was something else, probably the environment, the people around them, maybe their manager, who knows.
100%, because frankly speaking, it's probably better to be in a maybe lower paying job for a nicer manager.
Interesting.
Because we spend more than 80% of our lives in our office working with people. It doesn't matter what you do. You work with another human being.
And we spend more time with our work colleagues than with our own family.
Exactly.
When you meet clients on a daily basis, you know deep down what the companies stand for, their work culture, whether it's good or not. If a candidate reaches out to you and asks, what's the work environment like? Would you tell them the actual information?
Good question. Yes, I tend to be transparent with my candidates as much as possible. And normally what I would do is validate what they're hearing and say, because at the end of the day, if you've heard something about a client, you've heard a rumor about a company, you've heard a rumor. So I would tell the truth and I would say, yes, I've heard this. However, how do you really know unless you interview?
Yeah, you wouldn't really know it. But how would you really know? Not even if you interview, but if you actually enter the company, you would probably know even more as a potential candidate.
Precisely. It's very difficult. I think one of the biggest decisions that we make outside of who we're going to marry and which house we're going to buy, it's which job are we going to do. It's a really important decision. And I don't take that lightly when I speak to candidates as well.
So you mentioned about getting the actual interview and the role. What I see an interview process between two people, it's actually both parties putting their best foot forward, their best behavior and their qualities. How does a candidate gauge, or what are the kind of questions that they can ask you about understanding the company more and their potential fit in that role?
Candidates can always ask a recruitment consultant who they know in the business and who they're dealing with in the recruitment process. I normally do disclose this to my candidates because it does help them, and I'll always tell them that I've met with this person A, B, C times, and we've spoken about the subject or that subject. I tend to want to take a more personal view of my clients as well as my candidates. So I want to know about their lives because it makes me understand how they tick a little bit better. So in an interview setting, absolutely, everybody comes with their best foot forward, right? And it's interesting that you say that because it is a bit of a dichotomy, right? Because it's your perception of my perception of me. Am I doing the right thing? And so now we're all coming with this almost funny pretend version of ourselves that's not really pretend because we do have the competencies, but it happens. So what candidates can really do to understand culture and to understand and gauge these kinds of maybe rumors that are going around, or even, you know, to just understand like why does this seem like it's so good, is to ask really pointed questions.
Is it too good to be true? Yeah.
Yeah. So just say, look, this is sounding really, really good, Mr. Interviewer. Can I speak to somebody else in your team? I'd love to understand. Or can I meet the team in person?
This is something that I've never heard before, which is very interesting, because the impression that I've had is, as a candidate, whatever the setup is with the recruitment consultant or with the company or with an HR department, that is the process. To actually ask someone, can I speak to someone else? Can I get a reference check within the company? Is a very new thing to me, because it's usually the other way around. Companies would ask candidates for a reference check. So how often do you see this being done by candidates?
I don't think I've ever had any candidate do it.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean it's not an option. And I think given the right sort of environmental settings, if I were to put it that way, and the right sort of, you've got to set it up. However, I do have many of my clients that invite the candidate to the office, and I always tell my candidates, go see what it's like. Because a lot of people won't be able to fake a hello or even, an interaction. You'll see, and instinctually we know what this interaction is doing, and I can see if you like me or not, or if we're vibing or not. So if you're happy that I'm even coming to say hello as a new person. So you're going to see what their interaction is like. It's not like a parent saying to a child, you better be nice and you better say hello and you better, say
it's
please and thank you.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because managers can't do that. Your team members are not your children, so you can't tell them how to behave.
It would be a very natural setting. And I think when a candidate or a recruitment consultant looks at the paper, a CV or the description, it's way different than actually meeting them face to face. And even a step further would actually be visiting the office, because like you said, you meet the actual colleagues, you see the atmosphere. So it's a very big difference, and it's a very practical step that candidates should be aware of and should probably encourage to visit the actual office where the potential role will be based.
Exactly, or meet the person that you will be reporting into in person, even if it's not in the office and it's an outside setting. You can gauge a lot from a person's personality on how they treat a waiter. Or, do they say please and thank you? How they pay the bill, how they order their food. Even those little things can be indicators of, little tidbits into what this person is like. And remember that the same goes for you. You're putting them under a magnifying glass, but they're going to do the same for you. So
these are very subtle nuances that I think if someone observes very closely, then you get to understand the other person even more. And I think it's a very important tip to keep in mind from both points of view, from an employer point of view, as well as the candidate. If we look at the overall recruitment process, some companies just take a lot of time. They go back and forth, an interview takes place every couple of weeks, and that leaves a candidate very frustrated with the whole process. What do you think are the hidden cost of delays for companies that take a lot of time, and how can they be quicker in their process?
I can speak from, pretty much every angle of a business, because it's money. Usually the cost of not hiring somebody is costing you some kind of money. There's some kind of overhead that you are now incorporating, or some kind of loss that you are probably going to incur by not bringing this person in. And, it's interesting because there's a lot of statistics around what hiring is like and how retaining talent compared to hiring new talent, what it's like. It's something like 300% more to hire a new talent than to retain somebody, even if it's on a false promise, even if it's just for the next 6 months.
300% more. Wow.
It costs a lot more because you may have put that person in your business 3 years ago and you only needed to give them the inflation increment every year. But that's not what salaries have done for the last 3 years. They've maybe gone up by a lot more. Other benefits have also gone up and shot up. Or now your business has a different policy that this person didn't qualify for because they were with the business in 2022 and now it's 2025 and you have a new policy, but you didn't have to give it to people from a specific. So it can cost a lot of money to hire new talent. However, there is also a cost incurred for not hiring.
Which is probably even greater than the original one.
It is, because you are also putting teams under a lot of pressure to output work under a specific headcount that they no longer have. And it could cost you more money in having to hire new team members because now, as a result of one resignation, it started what we call the domino effect, which means that everybody leaves now. We have the mass exodus.
And what happens in that situation is workload falls on one person or two persons, and that even increases the stress. So this goes back to what we were talking about earlier about flexible working hours, giving annual leaves. If you have a sufficient headcount to begin with, then a manager can do that. But if unfortunately a company's resources are so tight or they don't hire at the right time, then it puts undue pressure and strain on the existing employees.
The other thing that we're not talking about is the cost of making the wrong hire, which is primarily my job. I don't have to do a lot of new roles. These are roles that have already been established in businesses for a long time. I mean, the accounting and finance function in most businesses is the first thing that gets set up. So the cost of hiring the wrong person is 600% compared to your 300% because now you've hired two people in the span of 6 months or 8 months because the first person you made the wrong decision or you made a decision and this person wasn't good for the job. So now you've had to maybe fire them or get rid of them, or you've had to move them into maybe a more junior position in order to train them up. And now you've got to hire a second person in order to do the job. So that could be 2 recruitment fees, for example, because you do pay agencies money when you place, headcount into roles.
And more than the recruitment fees and the thing, it's the time and money of the actual company because they didn't get the right decision in the beginning, which is why a recruitment consultant is so important for companies to use because of that expertise. If you were to walk us through your role from the time a company reaches out to you to the end placement that you do, how would that look like?
Initially, it depends on how the role comes in. But usually, if this is an established client of ours that we've had on our books for a long time, they know that they can pick up the phone and say, Alison, I'm looking for an accountant. And, this is what I need, A, B, and C. Because so I've had it in the past where the clients phoned me and said, Alison, I need a candidate. I need an accountant because your accountant did so well. We promoted her or him or whatever. So that's always a great, great story. From there, I normally set up a call or even go and meet the client in person just to get some notes. What are we looking for? Are we still looking for the same things? How have things changed? What do you want? What happened last time that you don't want? That sort of thing. I always in that meeting ask for a interview process. So how many interviews are we looking at? It never ends up being that. I can tell you that for free. Any candidates that are watching us now, the interview process we might get told is 3 interviews and an assessment, and it ends up being 5 and 2 assessments. That's out of my hands. Sometimes we've just got to be a little bit flexible, and because this person couldn't come to that interview, now you've got a 3rd interview or 4th interview added. So from that time, what I then do is I go and start looking for the right people. So my sourcing, is established on LinkedIn. We have a network as well, being a good, sort of being a well-established business. We have a network, and I network a lot as well. And then from there, I establish a shortlist. Well, I speak to every single person for at least 20 to 30 minutes,
Right.
sometimes 40, sometimes an hour. Depends on the conversation, depends on the depth of the role, depends on how much I need to know from that candidate as well. And I establish a couple of things. One is their communication skills. Can this candidate deal not only with me? I'm a recruiter. They need to be able to tell me in simple words how to do their job, but can they go and speak to HR about their job? And then from HR, can they pivot into a technical perspective and speak to the finance manager or the finance director, that sort of thing. So we look at different things, and then the shortlist goes to the clients. And this is normally where things start to slow down considerably. The sort of from the briefing to me sending CVs is maybe 2 to 3 days. Then it becomes maybe a week-long wait, or a couple days wait, or even 2 weeks, depending, because clients, everybody's lives are happening in between
right.
all of this, and that's what people forget. It's, you're waiting for an answer. Me too, but they're on holiday, or they're traveling, or whatever. So it can take a while, but that normally you can gauge a process is going to go quickly when you get that first interview happens within a week of you sending those CVs.
And more than that, probably, it's not only that everyone's busy with their own lives, probably even at work, they have their own internal deadlines, things need to be done. And maybe a finance person or a CFO has put recruitment a little bit on the side. They have a list of names from you, but they said, I'll look at it at the end of the week. And that directly impacts everyone else who's waiting. You as a recruitment consultant who's told your candidates that it'll take this much time. So there might have been situations when you told a candidate, look, we'll get back to you in a week. And you're also relying on the client. And a client takes much longer, a week, 2 weeks. So what happens in those situations? How do you manage a candidate's frustration? Because they speak to you, they won't speak to the end client yet.
Yeah, and they rate me too. I'll say that as well. They send in scores.
Oh, there's a rating. Okay.
There's ratings on that. So I've had a couple where the candidate is just frustrated. Are they even interested? And it's not even that. It's that the finance manager is trying to do the finance, but they are implicated in the recruitment because, unfortunately, this hire directly affects him, if or her, because if they hire the wrong person, the workload falls back on them. So, we have to just be adaptable and flexible. What is making it highly frustrating for candidates in this market is that we are seeing a lot of candidates in the region who have left jobs without other jobs.
Really? Okay.
And so we are seeing desperation play. And desperate people sometimes do silly things, and they say silly things, and they interview and say silly things as well. And so my advice to candidates in these situations is that if you haven't heard from your recruiter, it's not because they're not thinking about you. It's because they're probably busy with somebody else or something else, firstly. And it's not because you're not important. It's because everybody's important. How do we prioritize importance here? But also, it's because they haven't heard.
And when they haven't heard, there's nothing that they can tell you.
Yeah, it's the no news is good news sort of situation. If I haven't heard any news, I probably haven't phoned you or haven't messaged you.
You mentioned that a lot of people are leaving jobs without a job in hand. What could be the reasons for that? Is it for the culture, the management, or what are the main reasons you see as that happening?
I think what has happened is that people are not reading the job market as it is, but as it was. From what I can understand, 5 years ago, I wasn't recruiting in this market 5 years ago, but even 5 years ago, you could leave your job and within a month you had another job. The unfortunate part is that due to various circumstances around the world, whether it be political or economic or even social, we are seeing a world that is in a bit of a tough place. And so we are also seeing a surge in people coming into this country for opportunities, for better life opportunities and better work opportunities. And so what has happened is that it has made an oversupply of what is the primary sort of product, if you will. I don't want to talk about human beings as products, but an oversupply of candidates who are qualified and can do the job in the market. So a good senior manager of ours actually described it as the opposite of a needle in a haystack.
I see. It's the other way around.
We've got many needles and we can't find the haystack.
So it's interesting that you mentioned that the latest employment reports that I was going through, and you probably have the same analysis when you meet candidates, is hiring activity in finance is picked up in the UAE, 4% in the UAE, 3% in Saudi, 2% in Oman, and it's all going up. How do you think that impacts the overall market in terms of salaries and pay scales?
Well, when you have an oversupply, what happens to the cost of that thing is that it
goes down
dramatically. And that's what it has unfortunately done for a lot of professionals in this environment. And we are seeing a lot of employers, that are coming and they know that they can get professionals at a much lower salary than maybe they could have 3 or 4 years ago. And so it's leading it to make it very, very difficult for candidates that are in very senior positions to be able to move on from their positions because they cannot get the same salary even.
Is there something that candidates can do to differentiate themselves from everyone else in the field?
In terms of characteristics or?
In terms of recruitment, let's say you have 10 candidates who are all ACCA qualified, CFA qualified, they have the necessary skills, they have the necessary work experience. When you speak to these candidates personally, is there something that one candidate would say or do that makes you think this person's different?
Yes. Personality. As a human being, what I remember about somebody is their interaction that I had with them. And if it was a good interaction, if they came across as I think the problem with the professional market at the moment is that candidates don't know how to present and represent themselves. They think that the piece of paper in front of
is all enough.
Enough because and granted, they have gone through, a CA rounds of, it's 4 rounds of examinations. It's papers, 4 years of their lives. It's extensive. It just does not make up for this that we're doing now, this interaction. If you cannot speak about your job and you don't know how to interact with somebody and you can't do it clearly and logically and really calmly and just realistically, that's just not going to stick with anyone. It doesn't matter who you talk to. And I'm just the lowly recruiter. Now I have to sit this person in front of a hiring manager who said, I need a person with a strong personality because finance has basically evolved as a function. It's no longer just some person sitting behind a desk and sitting and punching numbers. It's not number crunching. Finance is not number crunching. Anymore. Accounting is not number crunching anymore. It is now interactions with other human beings in a business setting. And if you can't do that, I can't hire you, is basically what my clients are saying to me. So the one thing that candidates, I would say, can differentiate themselves is by being able to really communicate clearly what it is that they do and do it with enthusiasm. Show that you like what you're doing. There's a reason you decided to go into accountancy and finance. And I laughed in the beginning because it's an accountant with personality, which I think...
Like a running joke, yeah.
It's a running joke. I think everybody thinks, but that's what we want now, is finance professionals that have an exuberance, they just have some life to them in terms of passion. They clearly are very passionate because they're very studious. They've gone through all of this. They've done difficult things.
Yeah. That's what I was going to add. In terms of a finance point of view, like I've done my ACCA, people have done their CFA or CMA. There's a lot of papers. It's 16 papers, at least in my case. Every 6 months was my exam. It took a couple of years. That technical qualification in the finance field people have. But I think that training or understanding how to communicate effectively and confidently, that's something that should be part of the curriculum, I think, from the very beginning, whether it's in high school, in college, and as it transits throughout the different professional qualifications. If that was there from the beginning, I think you'd have more candidates having these very basic skills, which is something that's missing at the moment.
Definitely. I think the emphasis is definitely on the academic side of it, and it doesn't always translate as smoothly or effectively into the workplace, unfortunately. It doesn't teach us, these are life skills at the end of the day. If you can't talk to another person and have a conversation with them, it becomes a bit of a problem in the entire scope capacity of your life. Yeah.
And it's not just work, it's your personal lives, it's with your friends, your employers. It has to, I guess, transit throughout the entire structure of your life. If we look at a candidate in this market working in a job and they want to transition to another job and they see a lot of vacancies on LinkedIn or on different sites, is it advisable just to, there's the easy apply button, and maybe the thought process is if I apply to so many jobs, somebody's going to call me and maybe I'll get in. And I don't even tailor my cover letter, I just put my CV. Is that a wise approach?
Firstly, I don't know of any clients of mine that need a cover letter.
I see.
So, and that might be a controversial thing. And I'm not saying don't have a cover letter just in case, but you probably don't need one. The second thing is it's better to tailor than not to. I would say, rather, because I think what recruiters get frustrated about is we put a lot of adverts up on LinkedIn, and then we've got 3,000 responses within an hour.
Wow.
And we have to take it down because we're just flooded.
Overwhelmed, yeah.
We're completely overwhelmed with the amount of messages that come in. And now this person found my phone number. They're phoning me. They're WhatsApping me. Did you get my CV? I really want this job. I'm perfect for it. It becomes like a nightmarish situation, to put it very lightly. And every single person that I know that is a recruitment consultant complains about this thing. Equally, candidates are complaining about the easy apply on LinkedIn because of the amount of candidates, the volume of candidates that can apply and do. So it's in the thousands, and they become despondent because will anyone ever see their CV? And the likelihood is just, do you have the time to go through 1,000 CVs in a day?
Not. No. Nobody has the time to.
No,
you said 3,000 within an hour or two.
I don't have that time. I promise you, I wish that I had the time, and I wish that I could, but I already have to go through a filtering process because you might think that you're really good for the job. But my job ad might not speak to specificities that a client is looking for. And as candidates, I think when we become desperate, what often happens is that we see the title and we go, I can do that.
I can do this,
so they click easy apply, and they didn't look at the fact that I actually need a CIMA qualified accountant. I don't need an ACCA, and it's not the same. My client is looking for a specific certification. So, it's important that candidates read that entire job ad and go through and then tailor their CV to reflect what the job ad says, because you might not have put that you do month-end closing, but they require that, and it might be a non-negotiable.
We usually end the episode with a 60-second question, and I think today's question that struck me that I want to understand is, candidates that are currently in the MENA market, if they're looking to change their jobs or going for better jobs, what are 3 or 4 practical tips that you can advise them to do so?
Tip number 1, don't leave your job.
Don't leave your job. Okay.
don't make hasty decisions. Not in this market. It's a funny market. We're seeing lots of different things happening. We're seeing too many candidates. We're seeing thousands of applicants onto job ads, things like that. So rather be more strategic in how you're going to go about your job search. Also, I think another tip that I would give to candidates is remember that recruitment consultants are typically headhunters. They are not usually designed or coaching. They're not typically people that go and look for jobs for people. They look for people for jobs. Remember that. So it isn't uncalled for to be frustrated with your recruitment consultants, especially because you might be looking for a new opportunity. Try to understand if an opportunity is out there for you, because it might mean that you need to wait for one to arise before a recruitment consultant is going to get in touch with you. So it's always good to establish the relationship, but don't look for an immediate outcome because they probably don't have one for you. Sometimes they do, and sometimes it's that sort of luck of the universe. You decide to get in touch with me today, and I happen to have the perfect role that comes in tomorrow, and I can get in touch with you. Tip number 3 is tailor your CV, but don't make it too wordy. This isn't a high school essay. I don't want to read forever and ever. Neither does my hiring manager. So remember, you want it to be punchy, but not punchy in the sense of it's one word or 5 words. It should really
Get to the point.
It should get to the point, but it should show in a succinct way what it is that you do. And remember to look at the job ads that you are applying for, because some of these finance manager roles are not finance manager roles. They actually are senior accountants, but this is the highest position in a company. So remember that. And I think tip number 4 is to be patient. Be as patient as possible. Understand that this is a very big life decision that you're making, is to move jobs. It's one of, typically a lot of people might not move jobs even 5 times in their career. Think of it that way. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And you need to understand how to pivot yourself in a market, especially if you're going from maybe one set of finance to another. You might be looking to pivot from an AR to an AP, or you might be looking to go from a real GL to a more general accountant. How do you do that is quite difficult in a market that's got very set
Specific
lines for people, and they want people to stay within that. So understand the market as well.
Good things take time. Alison Daley, that was so insightful. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.